Welcome into another edition of Inside Carolina's Day After Podcast. I'm Tommy Ashley. We're sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. That's Buck Sanders. That's Jason Staples. It is Sunday morning, 9 a.m. on the East Coast. Folks in the chat, drop where you're watching us from. We've had some folks all over the world, and I'm always interested to see where everybody's tuning in. So a lot of North Carolina fans yesterday, Inside Carolina Live was in the parking lot. A lot of people came up and spoke. A lot of people at the game and after the game spoke and said they enjoy what we do here. We're just trying to do the best for everybody. Of course, the ship is steered by Buck Sanders, so Buck, you get the first word here. We talked a little bit off the air. I want your unvarnished, off the air talk we just had. Can you give it to me?
Yeah, I suppose I can without getting in too much trouble. Um, you asked me, what I thought of the game yesterday in general, and I said, well, this is the kind of game where whether you're a Pollyanna and sunshine pumper or a Eeyore and an asshole, you've got plenty to talk about today. You told me to say it unvarnished, so I left the varnish off of it.
I love it. Sunday morning, getting spicy right away. I agree with you, though. There was a lot of good in there. There was a lot of interesting in there. But one thing about it, Jason, well, I'll let you have your opening thoughts before I taint them with mine.
Well, for me, this was, as we talked about, when you come into this game, this kind of game, mission number one is to make it out as healthy as possible. And so in that sense, this game was dang near close to a loss as you could get. I mean, there were a lot of guys that went down that are probably going to be out for a little bit. And, a couple others that are nicked a little bit after this game that, matter. Starting with, your best player on offense. So, for me, there was plenty of good stuff, like you said, Buck. There's plenty to point to that you could go, okay, that's positive. But for me, I mean, I'm looking at it and I'm like, dang, like week 2, and you're already coming out of it like this. It's not great. So, there's a lot of negatives just in terms of, already dipping into the depth where you really didn't want to have to dip into the depth. So, yeah, gonna be interesting to see moving forward on how they handle all that.
Yeah, Carolina, of course. Omar and Hampton dinged up, Banfield dinged up, Blasky dinged up. Mac puts a great shine on everything, and we'll find out more Monday when Mac and the coordinators meet with the media about the extent of any injuries. Mac said most of those guys could have gone back in. So in the live chat, that's what we know about the injuries. Obviously, Kamen Rucker out for a little while, having a procedure done as well, but he did not play. But, Buck, one thing I did mention to you, and this is the neat thing for me, having young ones and having children, is we walked around the stadium afterwards and you see parents whose children don't always got to play, and for the most part played well. The joy and the happiness that they got to see. I got to think that's a big deal in this game for North Carolina, is getting all these young guys action in a real game. That is a huge thing. You mentioned Davion Gause. Bullet had a great opening game in Kenan Stadium. Buck, your thoughts on the youth and what you saw out there?
Well, it was good to see some players we don't get to see much of, as well as their parents getting to see them in a game. I know how important that is to parents and grandparents. But, as far as I thought, quite possibly, and this is what I said in my article, is that the biggest thing that came out of the game for me, and I guess I'm taking the sunshine pumper attitude instead of Jason, that Davion Gause is a player. He's going to help this team win some ball games this year. When Hampton comes back, and they said he could have played Saturday, but they left him out. And if I'm them, I'll leave them out altogether on against Central and just let Gause and the rest of the guys carry the rock. But I really, really liked what I saw from Davion Gause, and in my opinion, that's the most impressive debut by a true freshman in UNC football running back that I've seen since maybe Amos Lawrence. I mean, Javonte Williams didn't come in as a true freshman against anybody and have that kind of game. I think maybe he had a good game against Western Carolina as a freshman. This is Gause's second game ever, or first game ever, second game of the season, and he looked really, really good. I think what I like about him best is his vision. And I talk a little bit about this in my article, is that, Hampton, if he can go through you or around you, he's good either way. He doesn't care much whether he has to go through you or around you or over you. But Goss is got his eyes on where there's space, and he heads in that direction and gets to space quickly. So I really like that about him. I think they can, after yesterday, they can have some trust to put him in a good amount of snaps against anybody, and spell Hampton and give Hampton some real bench time. They could rotate those guys, maybe not like Javonte and Michael Carter, but they're going to be able to give him some snaps that I don't think they knew they would be able to do before Hampton had this tweaked his ankle. So to me, that's a really big thing, a big development for North Carolina football offensively this year.
Jason, what's your comments on that? And we'll stay on the offense on this side of the ad read. Goss, I mean, he's athletic. That hurdle play, I mean, that was pretty impressive. And he showed a little bit of burst. What'd you see from him, and anywhere else you want to go here?
Yeah, I kind of expected this to be the Darwin Gray coming out party, because I didn't expect Hampton to get more than 10, 12 carries as it was. He had 11, and he would have had more, I think, but had he not gotten a little nicked, and then they put him in bubble wrap after that. I would have almost liked to see him go in earlier, but
Darwin Barlow.
I expected, Darwin Barlow. The older you get on this, as you guys know, the more times that you get interference from remembering other players. But yeah, I expected this to be the Darwin Barlow show, and then he was ruled out, prior to the game due to something that came up during the week, and then you saw Gause, and he, like you said, Buck, he looked the part. The vision was really eye opening. I mean, I think you're right in singling that out, because it was a combination. His eyes and his feet worked together really well. Like he's not a beat late, which is what you see a lot with young guys. He's a natural, and that's a really positive thing moving forward. The other thing though is that he didn't look like he was lacking a whole lot in terms of the physicality of it. I mean, he broke some tackles, ran through some guys, and the burst was really good. So, a lot to build on there. And, when Barlow does come back, he's gonna have to compete just to get the carries that I think were presumed to be his early in the season as the sort of number 2 guy behind Hampton. And having a good amount of reliable depth at that spot is really, really important, because I think, again, and I've beat this drum from all off season, you can't expect to give Hampton the same kind of carry load that he had last year if you want to be successful down the stretch in November. You've got to be able to get to November with him, fresher, and I think having those guys able to get to take a drive or two, or a few carries here and there, is going to be really important, and Gause showed that he should be reliable in that moving forward.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. Mac in the post game talked about Bullitt and why he came to Carolina. He saw, and Buck, you mentioned it, he saw Javonte Williams and Michael Carter just trash Miami in that game, and said, that's where I want to go to school. And, of course, that was several years ago. So he's been a Tar Heel guy for a long while now. Let's sort of flip it. And we're talking with Buck Sanders and Jason Staples here on the Inside Carolina Day After podcast. Carolina 38, Charlotte 20. We will get to the defensive side of the ball, but drop your chat questions in here. I've got a couple I'm trying to star, but Buck, we talked all week about Connor Harrell, and this was his chance to do it. Connor got the overwhelming majority of the snaps. Jacoby Criswell got in late, but Connor Harrell, just your thoughts there. I think we talked last week, and I think, Jason, it was on the game plan about how it just needed to slow down for Connor. But did you see it slow down? I don't think I saw it slow down a ton for Harrell in this one. I could be wrong, but Buck, I'll let you, and then Jason can jump in.
I tell you what I got out of it, right or wrong, which I could easily be wrong about this, but what I saw is a really good game plan from Chip Lindsey as offensive coordinator, and saw, I think, what they were attempting to do is discover in real time what sorts of things Harrell is good at and which things he's not so good at. And I think they did some really interesting stuff. I love the reverse by to McCollum. That was a really delightful play to watch. I think a lot of what Lindsey did had sort of a Gus Malzahnian flavor to it, but they did some interesting things. And I think probably of a lot of the plays that we saw yesterday, several of those plays are going to get trimmed out of the repertoire for what they're going to ask Harrell to do, and then may add in some different ones, next week for Central. But I think that's the process they're going through right now, is discovering with live bullets flying what Connor's comfortable doing and what he's not comfortable doing. And so that's my major takeaway from it. What I saw yesterday, they had a lot of stuff in there. They had some pure option football in there. They had some read option. They had all sorts of different types of plays in there, including those two trick plays. So I think we're trying to discover what can we ask Connor to do that's going to keep him comfortable, and that's the ball game right now. You've got to get that quarterback comfortable doing some things that he can have success at, and build on that. You got to establish that baseline and then build on it.
Jason, get in here. There's some questions about Harrell in the chat. Somebody said it doesn't look like he throws guys open as much as other guys do, but just overall, and then I kind of want to get in the weeds a little bit here on the play calling, the comfortableness that they were trying to get him into.
Well, I mean, I think Buck's right that they use this as an opportunity to kind of test out. Okay, are you comfortable with this? What is it that we need to look at during the next week to try to get you more comfortable here and there. I'm actually curious from you guys, what did you see that you felt like he was comfortable on?
I think he's comfortable getting out of the pocket and just running. One pass he threw that I thought he looked really comfortable was, I think, down the left sideline, the home sideline to Nesbitt. I think that play right there, I thought he looked really good
for
on.
The touchdown. There was another play to the other side of the field that was similar to that I think is good. And not to get in front of Jason on this, but my opinion is he's a better quarterback when you only give him half of the field to read. That's my perspective.
And I felt like outside the numbers maybe.
That's right, and that's exactly what we talked about when we were talking about this in the game plan podcast. Is he's a guy that very much, it's an outside the numbers, half the field type situation at this point, where he's going to be much more comfortable. And I think that was exactly what we saw on Saturday. Now, I think as an offense, they know that when they play against better teams, they're going to need to get him comfortable on some other things on top of that to be more complete. Otherwise, your best teams on your schedule are going to make it difficult for you to be able to do some of that stuff. and they'll take away the outside of the field, and they'll say, you're going to have to win in here, and you're going to have to win in the pocket. Better teams are going to really make it more difficult for him to get the edge. I think he is much more comfortable throwing, sort of hole shots, flatter trajectory throws to the outside of the field. And he's much more comfortable if you can get him on the move and make it a high-low type situation, flood type stuff. And you can do some things with that. The good thing about that is that where he's most comfortable right now does mesh well with having a solid running game and a really good running back that teams have to sell out against. So the positive is that the stuff that you're most comfortable with at the quarterback position happens to just work well with a guy like Omarion Hampton and what he does. That's great. I still would like to see him locate. To me, I've talked about this for years. One of the bellwether throws for me. How well do you throw a bubble screen? Your basic screen stuff to the outside. Those are tougher throws than people realize. But are you forcing guys to turn around to catch it? Are you throwing it where, they're having to adjust to it? And every time you do that, you're taking away, 4, 5, 6 yards of available yardage because, the handoff isn't, these are extended handoffs. The handoff isn't reliable. And, it's little things like that right now where the throw is just, a lot of in the strike zone or just out of the strike zone misses that cost you. And the other thing right now that I think is a major work in progress is just comfort in the pocket to be able to find space. One of the things that Drake May is so good at, is dropping and then subtly moving in the pocket to find the spot where there's the most space to be able to throw from there where he's got a nice angle and move over. Right now, Harrell's still a little bit more mechanical, and you could see that on the interception. The interception happened because he got hit as he threw. He got contact from the back end, and that pulled the ball across and shortened where it was going. And the reason that happened is he didn't feel the pressure and just kind of subtly moved to put himself in the place where it was easiest to throw from. And it's stuff like that right now that we'll see whether he gets that at this stage of his career. But that's the stuff that you really just have to get a lot better at. And, I think they need to still be careful about him as a runner. I mean, he's a guy that does take some shots. I was a little bit mad at him a couple times just from a coaching perspective where he had an opportunity to just take off to the sideline and, you get basically the same amount and
whatever.
He, put a move on a guy and tried to turn it upfield. And it's like, no, son, you don't understand. This is not high school. You do not do that. You run to the sideline and you take the second and 3 and, you're fine. But because now it's 2nd and 3 anyway, and you just took a shot from 2 guys. Don't do that. So it's some of those things that where the growth needs to be. But we did see some comfort on some of the boot stuff, some of the getting out of the pocket and high-low type flood stuff, but still a long, long way to go.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a ton about the schedule, and they're a third of the way in this section of the schedule where they can work these things out, and it's still not be critical to winning or losing a game, so that they've got that opportunity next week as well. But I think we definitely need to talk about the offensive line here. It's great to me to watch the reaction when Carolina takes the commitment from a D3 offensive lineman. And then Jason and I talk about it, and we do these little previews and all. And here we are, Zach Greenberg from Muhlenberg County is playing center for North Carolina in a game, not in practice, in a game.
And played well.
And I thought he looked pretty good. Your thoughts there?
Yeah, I didn't think there was a huge drop-off there when Greenberg came in. I didn't see any obvious matador-like maneuvers on his part to put his quarterback or running back in jeopardy. I thought he played very well, and he's got good size and he's got good footwork, I think. and he acquitted himself very well. I didn't think they lost a ton. I don't think the player that replaced Banfield is the same quality, but they did it okay. And it's good to see the offensive line have a little depth, playable depth, in case, because this is going to happen. Guys are going to, get their breath knocked out. The variety of things that happen. They'll have to miss a series or two, and have people that can come in and play, and not create a huge mismatch in their play on the line. I think that's a big benefit. And it's don't get me wrong, they're not the Green Bay Packers yet of back in the day, but they're doing. I think they're coming together well, and they've got I think the bones are there for a decent offensive line, and for a decent offense all the way around. I think the bones are there. There's a lot to. You got to add some meat on those bones down the line, but I think the bones are there.
Jason, one thing I'm looking at is you had three false starts, and they spread that around. You also had an ineligible downfield, penalties on the offensive line. I think McGowan is the one that took Banfield's place there. But your take here on this offensive line, because it sort of all meshes to what we've already talked about. If Harrell's going to be a guy that's outside the numbers, one side of the field type play, then the offensive line needs to be able to gash guys up the middle so Hampton and Gause and Barlow and Caleb Hood got some run, can get the middle of the field working there. Walk us through what you saw from that offensive line on your first take. Obviously, you'll go through it more as the week progresses.
So I actually am going to disagree with El Jefe a little bit here in that I saw a significant drop-off. And now that doesn't mean that that there wasn't generally solid play. I mean, I agree. I didn't see any real Matador stuff or major the sky is falling type stuff. But you can go back. There's one play, either the first drive that he was in or the second drive, where you can see Greenberg he's about 4 yards deep in the backfield with the defensive tackle, and it completely changed the run play that was in that situation. I think it wound up being a tackle for loss or somewhere around a -1 or no gain type play, and it was just because the center just got beat across his face and gave up a ton of pressure. And in the passing game too, he's just not he doesn't anchor as well as Blasky at this point. But we kind of expected that, right? I mean, he's back up for a reason.
Yep.
And all in all, you feel pretty good about what you got from your backup center. Most teams in the country, if you get into your backup center, it's going to be ugly. It's not going to be very good. So I think that was a positive. But and McGowan, I thought, played well as well for in Banfield's place when he was in there. But again, I think Banfield is significantly a better player at this point. But you do have better depth than there's been on the offensive line in a good while, and this is a good example of coaching matters. But coming into this game, one of the things that I was thinking is you don't want any injuries right there. And you look at the guys you really can't afford to lose, and most of them are up front right now. And, Trevion Green went out for a little bit and was kind of dinged and, looked a little bit slowed in the second half. Blasky, if Blasky's out, McGowan is a good player, or McGowan is the guard, but Greenberg is a good player in terms of a solid backup. But Blasky really makes a difference for you up front, and I think that's a problem. I mean, to me, it looked like with how a guy fell on his leg, it's your usual high ankle sprain kind of situation, and who knows how long he might be out. But that's the kind of thing that nags at you the whole year from there, and then maybe you give him 2-3 weeks to fully get healthy. The good thing is, the luxury is that I think you feel comfortable enough with Greenberg that you probably can win the next 2 weeks comfortably without him. Then you get to your open date. So if that's where you are, if you need to do that, I think you can win with those guys So that's a takeaway, right? You can win with the backups that played. It's not been like that around Carolina all the time in recent years. But when you start getting into the meat of the schedule, you're going to need those guys. You're going to need the other guys, the ones to be healthy, that are your frontline guys. They need Blasky to be able to block, the Georgia Techs of the world at this point, which is kind of funny to say, but they need those guys to be able to do that, and it's going to be important to get healthy again on both sides.
Yeah, I mean, the conversation about depth, your point there, it hadn't always been that way. That's one thing Mac's done. Mac has gotten some quality depth into this program, and you mentioned the coaching. The coaching matters here in North Carolina. So the offense, still a work in progress, not anything we didn't expect going into Charlotte. They got Central coming to town next week. More opportunities to get better. Talk about Johnny T-Shirt, JohnnyT-Shirt.com. There you go. Look at the bottom. That's how you do it. That's how you enter it. If you can't get to East Franklin Street, you go to JohnnyT-Shirt.com. Get great customer service and great everything when you deal with those folks. They've always been supporters of Inside Carolina, so Inside Carolina needs to support them. Make sure local businesses do their thing at JohnnyT-Shirt.com. The swag. I saw a couple of the throwback #1 white jerseys in the parking lot down in the Bowls lot. That's a Johnny T-Shirt money purchase right there. Just go to Johnny T-Shirt. Tell them you're Inside Carolina Premium subscriber. Give them the code you find on the message board, and you get 10% off of it as well. National guys will pay the bills. We'll come back day after Carolina beat Charlotte. Okay, let's talk defense. It's the day after with Buck Sanders, Jason Staples, and me, and 355 currently of our most ardent supporters, Buck. This is where I'm not quite sure I know how to feel about this game, watching the defense play. Charlotte, both quarterbacks had some success. They did some things that wasn't expecting, but I will say the rush defense, once again, was solid, but they were able to throw it, so they didn't have to run it as much. But walk me through your feelings here on the defense.
Well, I think there's a couple of things we can get into. And one is, I hadn't given this a lot of thought until yesterday, but it's quite evident through 2 games that Marcus Allen is a bigger target than he was last year. And that's because on the other side, on the corner over there next to him, is Elijah Huzzie. And last year, that guy was Armani Chapman. And there's a big difference in the coverage skills between Chapman and Huzzie. People don't want to throw at Huzzie. They just don't want to throw at him. They didn't want to throw at Allen last year because he wasn't the weak link in the secondary last year. So he's just going to get more targets this year. People are going to throw at him more because they don't want to throw at Huzzie at all. Second, when you're good and at stopping the run, and that comes from commitment, you're committed to stopping the run, and which they've done 2 games in a row. Now, these are not the best running offenses they're going to face by far this year. There's a lot of teams that could run the ball better than either Minnesota or Charlotte. But still, I think they're giving up like less than 3 yards a carry at this point. And that's sack adjusted less than 3 yards a carry. This is the best run defense we've seen since the Butch Davis years, and so that's what we're living with. And when you stop the run, and at the same time you're trying to pressure the quarterback, which they're doing a better job of. They're tied for second in the ACC after 2 games in sacks. They're doing a better job of getting to the opposing passer, and they're doing a better job at stopping the run, which leaves the offense what option? They got Charlotte got 1 rushing play of over 10 yards the entire game. That's doing it. That's getting it done again in run defense. So they got 7 big plays out of their passing attack. And that's because that's what's left to them. That's what's left on the plate. And North Carolina aids in that in some way because they are so committed to the run and because they are so committed to rushing the passer. And, we've talked about this before, and we went this direction several times in the preseason talking about it and writing about it, is that, North Carolina's defense is going to be an aggressive one. You're going to have an aggressive defense. Collins is an aggressive guy, Minister of Mayhem, and all of that. Well, there's a price involved in playing aggressive defense, and that is, where you take your finger out of one hole in the dike, there's going to be another crack someplace else, and getting that all matched up, that's the province of teams like Georgia and other defenses like that. North Carolina's not quite there yet, but I see this defense as a big improvement over what we've seen so far.
Jason, looking at the stats, Buck mentioned the big plays. Stats show 8 big plays in the passing game. For me, that's a little concerning, but then I go and I dig into it and I look, and obviously it's not one person across the board, but they credit it's great TV too, by the way. At least two happened against Caleb Cost. They got Trey Miller on the coverage on one, and Stick Lane on one, Marcus Allen on one. It felt like to me, to Buck's point to start with, they were picking on everybody not number 28, not named Elijah Huzzy, and they had some success. What did you see on the back end and how it relates to the front end to all of this for Jeff Collins' defense?
Well, I mean, Buck, to some degree, went through my entire talking point list for this show in what you did on that. So we are simpatico on this in terms of what we saw. I was going to start with, you got one aspect of the pass defense that nobody wants to try right now, and that's 28. Huzzy is everything that we thought he was going to be when they first signed him, and looks like he's just flourishing out there, and teams are not even trying him. I mean, they're not looking at him, and if anything, it's screens his way, make him tackle, and he's tackled really well. So that helps your defense. But one of the things that I was not sure about coming into the season and into the first couple games was how well they cover at the star spot. I think Cost is a good player and has a chance to grow into a really good player. But I do wonder about his straight line speed. I mean, he's based on my sort of eyeballing it. I've kind of had him around a 4.6, somewhere in there. A little above a 4.6. Low 4.6, low to mid 4.6 area. And you get teams that have really fast slot guys, and they're going to start trying him. I was waiting on this at some point. Somebody's going to stick a slot out there that can really fly, and they're going to try him on, slot fades and things like that. They're going to force him to turn and run. This is what they did with Boykins as well, when he was playing that same position, and see if he can cover single on those. And as a single guy in that coverage, you're going to have to be really good at walling off, or you're going to have to be super fast. And this is something they're going to go back this week, and they're going to work on walling the vertical and taking away space and making sure you play over top. And then teams will do some other stuff on that. But, I do think that that's something that teams will pick on if they don't make some adjustments over the course of the season and if Cost doesn't improve. But the thing is, he's so young in terms of game experience that there's room to improve on that. So that was one thing that stood out to me, is knowing how I would have attacked this defense. I would have, and I wasn't going to say it on, in the preseason of like, here's how I would attack this defense based on what I know. That's not exactly the best way to go about things from our end, but looking at it early on, I was thinking, okay, well, one thing I'd want to try is see if I can get him in single coverage and see if I can attack that attack some slot fades and some things to make those stars handle that. We saw a little bit of that, and I think they'll have to adjust a little bit there. Marcus Allen, he is going to be the guy that's going to be tested more, more than Huzzy for sure. But, I thought he gave up a couple plays, but I thought he also had a couple that were solid coverage. I mean, he had one that was close to an interference, but he managed to get back to where he was playing the ball, and they kind of let it go. But he's got to be a little more consistent. He's got to be just a little bit better in terms of walling off of the press and all that. I thought he played pretty well. And then beyond that, this gets back to what both of you said. I would prefer giving up 4 or 5 big plays per game than giving up, 6 drives of 11 plays for 75 yards where they just pound you between the tackles and you can't stop them. Right? What are your choices? The thing about this is, of those 8 big plays, how many were touchdowns, Tommy?
1.
1.
Yep, and that was a
28-yarder. That was a short throw against the backups with 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Right? That's just that little quickie that they put out to the outside where there's a little bit of a bust by the third teamers, by the white team, not by blue team players. Yep. And you're gonna be fine without that. But beyond that, if you're giving up a bunch of big plays, if you give up eight big plays in the passing game, and the longest one of them, you look 25, 37, 23, 30, 40, 34, and 42, none of them were for touchdowns. Okay, well, if you're gonna give up big plays, make the tackle there and then win in the red zone. You're giving yourself chances, as opposed to, first of all, you don't want to give up big plays where guys are uncovered and they just run into the end zone, right? That's the thing you're wanting to avoid. But if you're going to give up, to me, 8 is too many, but 4 or 5 big plays, it's going to happen if you're going to really be aggressive and try to take stuff away. To me, I'll take that. As long as you're stopping them there, and then you get more chances to get stops in the red zone, that's fine. As long as you're getting something for it. All of defense, and like you said, Buck, unless you're Georgia, pretty much all defensive football is, okay, well, we're not going to give up this. If we're going to give anything up, it's going to be this over here. But in order to get that over here, they're going to have to give this up over here. It's all about, what do you prefer taking away versus what you're willing to give up. And it's pretty clear that Jeff Collins is taking a different perspective, a different angle than what they got the last couple of years from Gene Chizik. And it's something that we've thought was the right call. You've got to go away from, all right, well, we'll give them easy access throws to the on a little slant route to the guy in the slot. Well, 8 yards, 12 yards, 9 yards, run it for 6 yards. Yeah, there's no big plays, but you're not stopping anybody. As opposed to, all right, well, you got one drive where they get a 24-yard completion against you, and then you get a tackle for loss on the next first down, and then they run for 4 yards, and then then you got a 3rd and long, and you get them off the field because you get pressure. And yeah, you gave up a big play, but you got off the field. Right? The goal of defense at any level of football is to win your drive. Get off the field with giving up as few points as possible. And if there's going to be 10 drives in college football, let's say 10 drives per game, if you give up 3 scores, but one of them's a field goal, 17 points, you're going to win that game most of the time. So you give up 3 big plays. There you go. You give up 6 big plays, and you give up 4 scores out of that. One of them being a field goal. 24 points. You expect to win that football game. What you can't do is give up 6, 7 drives of, 15, 11, 10, 12 plays and give up, give up that kind of ineffectiveness in the running game and up front. And Collins has decided I'm willing to give you some of this stuff in order to take away that. I'm good with that.
I agree with that 100%. It's like going to the doctor's office when you got to get some procedures. Like, make it quick.
At a minimum,
Yeah.
right? At a very minimum, you're going to be fresher at the end of the game that way.
11 plays, 12 plays, 16 play drives, 80 yards, and a touchdown are far, far worse than, that one shot that you didn't know was coming, but they got it anyway. I mean, I don't have a problem with it. I see you in the chat, Jim. I'm going to throw this one up. I don't usually throw a bunch of comments up, but Jason turning a sow's ear into a silk purse. I mean, have you felt the inside of a sow's ear? It feels like a silk
Pretty
purse.
silky.
Yeah, it's silky in there, but I think it starts with stopping the run, and we'll see how they progress at that. Let's give a shout out. Are we going to have a Javari Ritzie portion of the program every game, Buck? I mean, Ritzie, we talked about, and Jason mentioned Caleb Koss, and I'm going to say this because I saw a couple. Caleb Koss can fly on the baseball field. It's a different animal on the football field, and it's a different animal when you're not 100% knowing where you're going and what you're doing, and he's still learning. So that's the speed thing there on the football field. But back to Ritzie. Talking about unlocking people. We talked about, can Monachino unlock these guys? Can Jeff Collins unlock these guys? They have flat out put Ritzie in a position to succeed with his help, with Ritzie doing a lot himself, in what amounts to a contract year for the young man. But what'd you see from him and maybe other standouts in that front seven for the defense?
Well, the thing that jumped out to me is that after his game last week, I had it in my head that the Charlotte Brain Trust on offense would say to their team, I don't care what you do, don't let this guy get loose. Find out where he is and make sure he gets blocked. I was looking for somebody else to step forward on the defensive line and have a big game because they would be focused on Ritzie. But even though they knew that Ritzie was coming into this game, yesterday's game, with pockets full of stacks already, they still couldn't contain him. And I think partially that has to do with the rest of the defensive line. I don't think there's a weak link on that defensive line. I just don't see it as any place where they're playing with a less than replacement level player on the defensive line. They're doing some good work, I think, there, and Mac Brown complimented Monachino after in the presser. But you can see it. You can see those results that they're getting stuff done on the defensive line that they haven't been able to do in the past, and I think we all know why that is. So I wasn't prepared for Ritzie to have a big day yesterday, but he had one anyway. And so we'll just have to see as time goes on whether we start these podcasts with, Droy Ritzie had a Ritzie day. Let's move on. So we'll just see how that goes. But so far, he's been a terror.
The J5 portion of the program. I'm
going to pour a little bit of at least lukewarm water on this. And that's that, he had 2 sacks, right? And beyond that, not a ton. And each of those sacks was him doing his assignment correctly and cleaning up after somebody else got pressure on the quarterback. Right, which is also what he did against Minnesota. This is not a situation where he's been getting a ton of penetration himself and causing a lot of the havoc. He's been doing a great job of cleaning that up. So, play your rush lane correctly. When the quarterback bounces into that rush lane, finish the tackle. That's great. And 5 sacks through 2 games is great. But I do think it's important that we not overvalue the stats and say 5 sacks in 2 games. Wow. Because not all sacks are made equal, right? Not all sacks have the same value in terms of what they say about how much havoc that player has actually generated. And, this is, I think, a good example of that. Of his 5 sacks, I think 4 of them have been basically cleanup of somebody else flushing the player straight into him.
And he ran down the guy in Minnesota, which is the other one. But to your point, and I don't want to step on your comment, but this is Carolina's defense we're talking about.
Right.
And what you're talking about hadn't always been the case.
Right. But my point is that it's not the Ritzie show on that. And if I had been Charlotte, I would not have watched the film from Minnesota saying, I got to block that guy because he had 3 sacks. I'd be going, well, I got to block those guys because those are the guys that flush the quarterback into that guy. Bo Atkinson has really played well as a pass rusher. He has caused some serious problems. You look at 17. Amari Campbell has had multiple pressures from the linebacker spot. I think Stick Lane was one of the guys that he had a safety blitz that resulted in one of those sacks. So that has been. To me, it's the havoc portion of the podcast, maybe. Not the Ritzie portion yet. Now, if Ritzie keeps managing to clean up and, put up numbers like this, then okay, fine. But to me, it's the havoc portion because what they've done is they've done a great job of creating one-on-ones for the people that they think can win those one-on-ones and generate pressure. And they've been getting wins in those cases. So, Amari Campbell has won some one-on-ones against guards. Stick Lane won a one-on-one against an offensive tackle, beating him around the edge in this one. You've got Bo Atkinson won multiple one-on-ones against the edge blocker in this one. So that and Des Evans continues to play good football to my eye. He's not done a whole lot in terms of stats or numbers, but he's played good football through the first 2 weeks. So to me, it's the havoc portion of the show more than just a one-player thing because the numbers are not indicative of who's been generating all the pressure yet in terms of who's actually gotten the sacks. And that's not to say Ritzie hasn't played really well. I think he's taken a huge step forward so far this year, and he's done his job of generating filling gaps, of taking his proper gap responsibility, filling it against the run, getting some penetration here and there, and then in the pass rush doing it correctly, compressing the pocket and being patient and sound in his rush lane. But let's ease off the gas just a little bit this early in the season before we crown anybody.
Was that's not a sow's ear, Jim. See, that's the old Razorback Jason Staples doing his thing there. I do agree with you 100% on that. One thing I do want for the average watcher of the sport is the stats matter in that regard. The numbers matter in that regard because, like we talked about last week, and like I asked Jeff Collins, Des Evans had 0 stats from last week against Minnesota, and he played great in what they wanted him to do. And so the stats in that regard for the average watcher is a good thing. Javari Ritzie, 5 sacks. It doesn't matter whether he was cleaning up or running a quarterback down. Folks see that. And what we do on this show and on all our shows is try to dig a little deeper. So Jason just dug it down, drilled it down, and you got it there. Talk about congruity before we get out of here, congruityhr.com. The place to be for your small to mid-sized business. Go to matt@congruityhr.com. Email him. Tell him, say, hey, man, I'm an Inside Carolina subscriber, and they tell me I can get a small to mid-sized business assessment from you, and maybe you can help me grow my company like you grew yours from a local brand to a national brand. matt@congruityhr.com. Customer service, technology. You do that, they can help you expand your business and do all the heavy lifting for you while you just sit back, grow your business the traditional ways, Matt and Darren and all the guys at Congruity. Last part of the show, about 10 minutes to 10. Shout out to the 400 plus that have joined us. I don't have the PFF grades. My stuff's locked up. I assume everybody else is. I was trying to look. Tyler Woods says Bo was the highest graded. But closing thoughts here. Carolina, of course, has Central at 6 o'clock on Saturday, and so another week's worth of getting better and improving. What you think?
I thought it was important and almost a necessity for North Carolina to play as many guys as they did yesterday, particularly on defense. I think that's something we haven't really talked about much here, but I remember during fall camp, Jason talking about Rodney Laura. He came in and he looked pretty good. 92. Looked pretty good on defense. So he was in the third quarter on different points. So getting kids like him and Joel Stallings and Tyler Thompson and Jabron Harvey and those guys some snaps and letting them get in the game, get their feet wet. That's great, and we'll probably see a lot more of that next week. But still, I think, and I probably am overestimating this, but just based on what I saw Davion Gause do yesterday, that's the most positive takeaway from that game, and maybe something they can use going forward.
Yeah, J. Brown Harvey, Tyler Thompson, of course, getting run there when Kamen Rucker was out. It's another portion of their depth we've talked about. They've got talented depth that needs to get better, and you only get better by playing meaningful reps for these young guys and having some success. Jason, final thoughts before we get out of here. Carolina 38, Charlotte 20.
Thompson flashed to me a couple times, and I thought Starling got in there earlier than maybe I would have expected, given the proclivities of Mac Brown in terms of make sure the game's out of reach a little bit before certain guys play. But I thought Starling's handled his work well early on when he was still going against the ones as well. So some positives there, and this was a game where the depth. One of the things we heard from the coaching staff coming in was that they felt the depth this year had improved over recent years in terms of what they had, especially on the defensive side. And I do think you're starting to see that. I do think the difference in approach on defense is evident. They're trying to get pressure, and they're trying to force teams to basically take the opportunities to try to beat them on big plays and all that. They got to stop giving up as many as they've given up. But I do think it's the right approach for what they're doing and for the personnel that they have. Lots to clean up, but you're 2-0, and 2-0 with a lot of room to grow in terms of your roster. And as guys get healthy again, you got to get Rucker back in a few weeks and all of that. This is still a team that has a chance to actually win. There's no reason that they should not be favored in the next 5 games.
Yeah, I think we remiss in not talking about how good they were in the red zone and forcing field goals. And they only had the TD percentage in the red zone for both opponents combined is like 42%, which is really low. And plus they only gave up 2 third down conversions in 14 tries yesterday. So those things defensively, if we weren't talking about so many other things, they would have led the program, because those are big things for North Carolina football.
Yeah.
Actually, correct me. It should be 5 of the next 6 games that I would expect this team to be favored in. So that that doesn't mean you win them all, but I do think that in terms of what we've seen so far this year, that's basically where this team is, and that's a positive.
Yeah, you can't win them all unless you win the first 2. Carolina's done that. You play to win the game. Carolina wins 38-20 over Charlotte. Central next. Stay tuned to Inside Carolina for all the coverage. I mean, you've got all. If you haven't watched the press conferences, the post-game press conferences, you got Gause up there. You've got Amari Campbell. You got Javari Ritzie. Pay attention to all those at Inside Carolina on the YouTube channel. Taylor and Schottmer. Then On the Beat, new version of On the Beat, and then we'll be right back here on Thursday night with a game plan for North Carolina Central That's Buck Sanders. That's Jason Staples. Congruity, Johnny T-shirt, and me. Take care, everybody. Happy Sunday.